place to work. University of Illinois Extension.
I'm here with John Church, and I'm Bill Waisner, and this is Spotlight on Natural Resources. Our topic today is a very timely one, Christmas trees. So, John, I imagine you get a fair number of questions about Christmas trees every year about this time.
This is the time of year, of course, that people are starting to think about going out and getting their tree.
So, the perennial question is, do you go out and cut your own, or do you go to a lot? Is the one that you get from the lot going to be a lot less fresh than going out and cutting it yourself?
You know, that often is one of the main questions as far as whether I should buy a cut-your-own type tree, and then, of course, where do I go to do that? Or should I just go down to the retail sales lot and buy a tree? And really, it doesn't matter that much as long as you're careful if you're buying a pre-cut tree to do a few simple steps to keep it as fresh as possible throughout the season. But there's no question, if you want the freshest tree, that cutting your own is going to give you the freshest tree versus one that's been on the sales lot for a period of time, and in some cases maybe has been cut for a month or so. In some cases maybe has been exposed to a lot of wind and sunlight in its transport down to the sales lot. And once it gets there, it's sitting on the sales lot for a period of time. So there's no question that cutting your own will tend to give you a fresher tree because you know when it was cut and you know how you're taking care of it between then and putting it up in the home.
So how can you tell? Let's say you're not up for trekking out into the middle of the Christmas tree farm and you do want to go out to the local retail. How can you tell if it's fresh?
Well, that's a good question, and we don't want to downplay or discourage people from buying it from the retail sales lot. For a lot of people, that's their only choice. For a lot of people, that's something they want to do because in many cases they're supporting maybe a charitable group that sells Christmas trees for fundraising. So there's lots of good reasons to go ahead and buy it from the sales lot too. But if you're going to do that, you could ask first if the sales lot people know when the trees were cut and how they were handled. So you could ask that. In many cases, they may not know that information. So you can go ahead and do a couple simple freshness tests. And, these are variable as to how really good they're going to tell you how fresh the tree is. But on the other hand, they give you some idea. First, you can just kind of take the tree and kind of tap it on the bottom of the trunk, just kind of lift it up and tap it a little bit and see how many needles are falling off. Now, if you're getting a lot of discolored needles that are kind of in the middle of the tree still falling off, that's probably not so much of a concern because they might be sheared needles or they might be older needles that would naturally drop. But if you're getting a lot of green needles dropping and they're dropping from kind of all over the tree, then you might have a question about the freshness. The other thing that you can do is just grab a branch or two and kind of run one of the twigs through your hand, through your fingers. And the needles still should be pliable, should be kind of soft, and probably even have a little bit of an odor to them yet when you do that. Now, the only one thing we would say is that typically that will tell you whether the tree and the needles are fresh, if the needles are pliable. But when it comes to pine trees, we would mention that they can be tested for freshness on their needles, that when they're really fresh, they'll bend and break even when they're green and fresh, kind of like a fresh carrot would. So if they're getting a little bit older, you know how a fresh carrot kind of gets older and you can't really...
Become mushy.
Right. You can't break it very easily.
Well, you say pine. Are there other types that we should be looking at? Or
see, that just, you ask all the right questions, Bill. But yes, of course, pines are probably one of the most popular Christmas tree varieties overall, and Scotch pine specifically is probably one of the most popular ones. It's grown throughout the Midwest. It's grown in Illinois. It's readily available. A lot of the sales lots have them. And because it tends to be one of the more popular and more prevalent, it probably tends to be a little cheaper in price than some of the others. So anyway, Scotch pine is one of the favorites. But there certainly are others. What we're seeing is an increase in things like spruce and fir. Some of those have become more popular for indoor trees. One of the ones that has kind of grown quite a bit in the last few years in popularity is called the Fraser fir, and that's partly because of its appearance. It has a little bit more of a silvery appearance to it, and it tends to have good needle retention. It's not grown as widely by Christmas tree growers here in Illinois yet, anyway, and so the supply tends to be a little shorter. And with popularity increasing and supply a little bit less, the price might be a little higher.
Be higher, yeah.
But in general, we're seeing firs and spruce get a little more popular. Sometimes people like to stick with certain varieties because they have more of a characteristic that they like,
or something like that.
So for instance, the pines, depending on which type of pine, but most of the pines are going to have a little bit more of an openness to them, so you can hang ornaments a little easier. Some of the firs are quite soft, both in terms of their needles, but also in how their branches fall. And so sometimes they're not as easy to hang heavy ornaments on. So people get used to a particular variety.
So now we've selected the tree, and let's say that we've cut it, or even if we haven't, we're getting it from a retail. What's the best way to get it home? A lot of places, for example, will continue to have it in kind of a wrap. Is that the best way to take it home? It's going to be easier to transport, I suppose.
Ideally, it would be nice to buy the tree without it being wrapped, because you want to see kind of the condition of the tree. But some places, like you mentioned, will go ahead and wrap them again in netting to make them easier to carry home. When we're talking about exposure on the transport home, it's not so much whether it's wrapped up or not. That reduces some exposure, but if at all possible, put them inside a trunk or inside the truck, or cover them with a tarp, whatever, because it's amazing how much loss there can be in terms of moisture loss on those needles when it's kind of cold out and you're driving 50, 60 miles an hour down the road with the tree on top of your roof of the car. You can lose quite a bit of moisture. So it's best to cover it up, wrap it up, or put it inside the vehicle.
So, okay, now you've got it home, and do you leave it in the garage for a while to acclimate it to being warm, or do you take it right back into the house? What do you think?
It depends, basically, and we'll talk just a little bit later about the actual living tree. But if you're buying either a fresh cut tree or one off the lot, it doesn't make that much difference if you store it in the garage for a while before you take it in the house. Some people do that just because they aren't ready to put it in the house, but they want to go out early to get their good selection. So if that is the case, then if you've got a place like a garage where you can put it, and ideally if you could put it in a bucket of water in the garage where it's not exposed, again, to the wind outside or the sunlight and so on, that's not a bad way to store it until you're ready to put it up in the house.
What about making a fresh cut on the bottom? Is that advisable?
Especially when you're ready to take it into the house, make sure you make a fresh cut. And even if you just cut your own and it's relatively fresh, make that fresh cut of maybe another inch or so on the bottom of the trunk, and be sure to get it in the stand and the water then before that seals over again, because by doing that you're opening up that trunk then to be able to take water up in a better way.
So and watering daily, especially at first, is probably a real good idea.
And maybe even more than once a day. Watch that water level, that it does not drop below the bottom of the trunk. You don't want to give that trunk a chance to seal off again. So keep the water level above the bottom of the trunk. Not the easiest thing to do, especially with a big tree crawling under there to do it.
But you see lots of devices these days to do that. One we've tried kind of is a long-necked thing, maybe 3-4 feet hollow tube, and then a kind of a bell on the end that you can water. That way you don't have to chase your kid underneath with a pitcher of water, and they've managed to spill the water all over everything. I have experience in this, John.
I can tell that, and you're doing the right thing if you're using some of those techniques, because it kind of keeps people doing the watering like they should for a longer period of time. Some people get tired of crawling under the tree. So before long, a week or so, and you aren't doing it anymore, pretty soon the tree dries out. So you can buy them commercially, or you can make your own little piece of hose and little funnel that you can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would work.
So, and the other question that comes up, should I just use water, or should I use some additives that you can buy commercially to put in the water? Should I put sugar in the water? All these things. Good plain water is as good as anything.
Cool. So now you mentioned live trees. And every year you hear about that. I always worried that if I got a live tree of any size and brought it in, then the shock of taking it out, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I think you really need to think ahead and plan ahead if you're going to use a live tree. And typically what you would buy as a live tree would be a tree that is still living and comes with a ball and burlap type situation, ball of soil on it and then wrapped in burlap. And you really need, one, to plan ahead because you need to have a hole already dug out in the yard so that when Christmas is over you can plant that tree. And if it's 1st of January and the soil is frozen solid, you can't plant it too easily. So you have to have the hole dug ahead. And then once you dig that hole, you need to mulch down the soil so that that needs to be replaced back in the hole so it doesn't freeze. You've got to be able to use the soil to put back in. And the transition, as you mentioned, from outdoors inside needs to happen over a few days. It needs to gradually go from the cold climate to maybe a little bit warmer climate like a garage and then into the house. And then the same process coming back out of the house. Let it kind of compensate for the differences in both moisture and temperature levels in the air inside and out.
So, okay, let's just suppose that I'm not that forward a planner and my method of disposal is going to be something other than planting a live tree. What should I do with the tree after I'm done? Throwing it in the neighbor's yard and lighting it, probably not the way to go.
Unless the neighbor and you like to do a New Year's Eve bonfire or something.
We'll say that that's what we're doing.
Okay,
yeah,
right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yes, if you're using a cut tree, so therefore not a living tree,
right.
but a pre-cut tree, then there are disposal methods that can be done that make more sense than just putting it up for the landfill folks to take. And in Illinois, you cannot send yard waste to the landfill anymore unless the landfill takes it for composting. But Christmas trees are not considered yard waste. So technically, they can go to the landfill. But we really don't encourage that. Instead of doing that, go ahead and use the tree outside. You can actually stake it up and use it as a bird feeder or that type of thing for the winter. You can just let it lay on its side, and it creates a little bit of wildlife habitat. You can cut it up, cut the branches off, and you can use that to kind of cover up some of your more delicate plants that need a little bit of winter cover protection from the wind and sun. Or you can take it, some park districts or cities will take the trees in, run them through a mulcher, chipper, and then anyone can use that to come back and pick that mulch up for mulching purposes. So there's all sorts of things that can be done with that tree rather than just taking it and sending it to the landfill. And burning it is one other option, but make sure you have the proper permissions to do that.
That's right. In a lot of areas, that's probably not thought upon being a good thing to
Well,
do now.
and when you mention burning, it is interesting how many people still ask the question, could I cut it apart and use it for firewood in a fireplace? And no, being a fresh tree like that, you don't want to create that situation in your home
Creosote
fireplace.
problems
Right.
and that sort of thing.
So definitely don't do that. You could let it dry out and use it in your outdoor fire pit potentially, something like that.
Yeah, it would work for that. So let's say that I want to go get a tree and cut it down myself. I'm up for crawling around in the mud for another year. How do I find Christmas Tree Farm? Any place that you can suggest looking on the web? Or
Well, there are a number of sites that you could go to find that sort of information, places both commercial and governmental, but the one that, of course, we would suggest that you can do a search here in the state of Illinois and surrounding areas is University of Illinois Extension has an excellent Christmas tree website.
Oh.
And not only does it talk about cut your own farms, but it talks about a lot of the things that we've talked about today, only in more detail, and a lot of other information up there too. But you can go to Urban Extension. There's no www on this one. It's Urban Extension, and actually it's shortened to Urban EXT, all one word, Urban EXT, .Illinois, spelled out, state spelled out, .edu/trees. urbanext.illinois.edu/trees.
Very good. Well, I think that probably covers the topic of Christmas trees fairly well. And this has been Bill Wasner and John Church for Spotlight on Natural Resources.